Hello. This short video explains the process of peer review as a scientist, as a student, and more broadly as a professional tasked with completing any piece of writing. Put simply, peer review is the process of asking others to provide comment on your work. It's usually used in the context of a written work, but can just as easily be applied to the review of calculations, code, or methodology. As an author, we are asking questions of our reviewer such as, is this any good? Can you see any mistakes? Can you see any mistakes in my calculations or my mathematical logic? Is this well written, or does it need to be revised, and if so, how? Is my work believable? Have I presented appropriate evidence to support my argument? It can even be applied to the fundamental question, so what? Has the purpose of the work or why it is interesting been established? For the purposes of this presentation, we distinguish between the concept of formal peer review undertaken by researchers as part of the publication process and a more informal type of peer review conducted with colleagues and trusted friends to assess the value, correctness, or appropriateness of your work. Peer review of research is the foundation of the acceptance of new knowledge. It has been refined to a reasonably standard approach across all scientific publications. An author conducts a piece of work and writes a manuscript according to the instructions provided by the journal to which they are intending to submit the work. It's submitted to the journal and assessed by an editorial team as a screening step. It can be rejected at that point as not conforming to the technical requirements of the journal. It's therefore important to be able to carefully follow these instructions. An editor then appoints a set of peer reviewers. There are usually 2 or 3 reviewers appointed on the basis of their expertise in the field and their capacity to assess the validity of the science with some depth. This is a blind process in that the authors do not know who the reviewers are and the reviewers act independently of each other. They provide a recommendation to the editor. If the author has done an exceptional job of preparing the manuscript, the paper will be accepted without alteration. More commonly, the reviewers will at least ask the authors to make some minor revisions. If the reviewer finds significant fault with the paper, they will either recommend that the paper is rejected or that they should have an opportunity to review again after some major revisions have been conducted. So there are multiple points at which the paper can be rejected. It is not a simple process to navigate, and there is significant importance in preparing the first submission of the manuscript to the absolute best ability of the authors. Peer review of research is the foundation of the acceptance of new knowledge and has been so for centuries. It was originally established to allow quality control over the work that was placed in the scientific domain. Today, with an enormous amount of freely available information on devices that we carry in our pockets, a process of quality control that presents a trusted source of information is now arguably more important than ever. Performed rigorously, the peer review process actively addresses issues of integrity in research, and in doing so allows for public trust in science and research. After all, most research is funded by the public. By employing experts as peers, quality and excellence are ensured, and the boundaries of knowledge in the field will continue to be pushed. But peer review of research is not without problems. In fact, from certain perspectives, it is rather fraught with problems. From the perspective of the researcher, it is an arduous and time-consuming process. From submission of a manuscript to final publication in a printed journal, the process can take years. It is rarely less than 6 months, though these days articles appear online much sooner. It's also a personally challenging process. One presents work in which one has invested time, energy, and funds to the scrutiny of reviewers. All reviewers take the process seriously, but some are not shy in providing criticism rather than objective critique, which can be difficult to take. A not uncommon occurrence is that 2 of the 3 reviewers like a paper, and a third tears it to shreds. Sometimes reviewers present contrasting views on the same part of a manuscript, so what to do in these cases? As researchers, we try to remain objective and take each critique as having the potential to improve a paper. In the end, researchers have the opportunity to respond to the reviewers and can carefully argue against the claims of the reviewer. Critics of the peer review process also point to the overwhelming numbers of papers that find support for their hypothesis, the important works that have been rejected by journals, works that have been accepted and then found to have been based on fraudulent data, and the fact that the process is rarely truly blind, in that the reviewers know who the authors are. Informal peer review is a less structured process. As professionals, we engage in it all the time. We ask colleagues to look over a document to check that it means what we think it means, or that it is pitched at the right level. You'll be glad to know that all your exam papers at university go through a peer review process too. When initiating a peer review, we need to consider who to engage, when to engage them, what we want them to review, and how we want their input. In an informal peer review sense, the formal peer review sense we have discussed so far, a peer is an expert in the field identified by a journal editor. In an informal peer review, a peer is someone who should be able to understand the work and provide feedback that can improve the work. They should therefore have an appropriate level of training or experience. Their opinion should be trusted by others. This can be difficult to establish, and even journals sometimes get it wrong. As an author looking for informal review, the only person whose trust must be gained is you. Peer review is best performed on an ongoing basis. There is a danger in leaving peer review until you have a final draft of a piece of work ready for submission. What if your reviewer picks up a serious flaw in your logic, or finds the writing to be pitched at the wrong audience? These are both best picked up earlier in the process. When you are presenting something to a reviewer, it's important that it is in a form that they can comment on. It's fine to provide early drafts, but it's important that the overall direction of the work is clear, or the reviewer will not be able to give highly constructive feedback. The reviewer needs to know what the author wants feedback on. Is it content, or the use of language, or a check of the mathematics in the solution? It is often also useful to be clear on whether you're open to quite deep critique. That is, do you, as the author, consider this a no-holds-barred review? Finally, between the author and the reviewer, there needs to be agreement on how the feedback will be provided. Written feedback is the usual format, but there is value in considering going through the feedback process in person, so that issues can be discussed and solutions arrived at iteratively. So how should you behave as a reviewer? Peer review is not simply telling an author that they are wrong. Our goal is to provide effective feedback. Effective feedback is about helping the author to improve their work in the piece that is being reviewed or in future work. The author needs to understand why you think that something can be improved and examples of how it can be improved. Effective feedback as a reviewer is an art, but there are some key guidelines that can help us be effective reviewers. All feedback should be constructive. It should allow the author to take positive steps to achieve their goal. The best way to achieve that is by providing examples of how change can be made. These must be actionable. It is also very important to point out the good things that the author is doing. If you like a section of their writing, let them know. It's difficult to overstate the effect that this has on an author. Remember that it can be very difficult to ask a peer for feedback, and it is truly uplifting to know that they like parts of what you do. Very importantly, all feedback needs to be about the work and not the person. Personal comments will not help them improve their work and can be very damaging in the long run. And remember that if you provide effective feedback to others, they are likely to do the same for you. So to summarise, the formal peer review process is steeped in history and is important in research quality control, but it is a challenging and time-consuming process to navigate and has critics from within and without research. Informal review between peers is a professional skill that you will engage in all the time when you leave university. It can be difficult in the beginning to present your work to peers for evaluation, but it gets easier with practice. Formal peer review demands consideration of who an appropriate peer would be, when the best time to commence the review might be, what it is that you want reviewed, and how the review and subsequent feedback will take place. Finally, providing effective feedback is a professional and leadership skill worth practicing through your time at university and beyond through your career.